Mike Casazza, he is 247 Sports, covers West Virginia. We've had Mike on before. Joins us Craig Smoke, David Smoke on 365 Sports. Mike, what kind of a boomerang or like just blindside weekend was it, knowing Huggy had the issue a few weeks back, but then having this story pop and he's gone?
So here's something funny about this job, and by funny I mean miserable. Last month, in the beginning of May, I was like, oh, I think I'm going to try to do something this weekend. I had a small plan, and then on a Friday afternoon, Bob Huggins does the radio, and there goes my weekend. This time, I took my vacation. I went to Hawaii for 2 weeks, and no one's going to feel bad about that. But I got home Friday and was trying to get back on normal time Saturday and watching TV with my wife at around 10:30 at night. And they have these things called phone calls that people will do every now and then. I think we're all used to like text messages and DMs. I got a phone call, which is like riveting. And it was probably a good thing because like I knew it was urgent. It was one of those people who doesn't really text. Person called me and said, man, you're not going to believe this. And like, just to be honest with you guys, like I thought it was maybe them adding a player from the transfer portal. Mm-hmm. You know, they're maxed out on scholarships, but like they were, you know, looking at a guy named Paul Mulcahy from Rutgers, and I'm thinking, oh, maybe they got this guy to come in, or maybe there's something with, you know, assistant coaching contracts. Who knows? 10:30 Friday night must be interesting. I'll pick up the phone, and you know, the person laid on me, and like because we're on the phone, there was this pause, and he said, "Are you still there?" And I was like, "Yeah, wow, right." And from there, it just kind of followed along those lines of, you know, are you kidding me? Is this really happening to this guy at this time? Like the one thing that he couldn't do did. And then, you know, from there it was just kind of like old school journalism a little bit. You roll up your sleeves and you get police blotters and you try to call public information officers on a Friday night, figure out what's going on. No one knows anything. And like, I was talking to people who were like generational police people who heard on a police scanner and couldn't believe it and weren't sure, but were trying to give me details. And, it's still surreal. I mean, here we are a couple of days later and it's, you know, an ending that maybe you thought that could one day happen for this guy. And for anybody, I guess, in this profession, but to have this happen to this guy so close to what happened last month is, I don't know what the adjective is. It's the adjective escaped me, except that it's just not something anybody wanted to see or expected to see.
Mike, you know how it is. I mean, you peruse through social media, and you're going to find, even if it's the craziest opinion in the world, you'll still find an opinion for just about anything. And so I'm sure there were probably some people like, well, is there still a chance he could overcome this? You know, and even if that was a very, very small minority, was there any question in your mind that when you heard the news, like this was it, like there's no coming back from this? Or was there any sliver of like, well, just maybe, but or was it just, okay, this is over now?
Yeah, I couldn't sleep Friday night. Not gonna lie to you. You know, I'm not a fan of the team or the program or the coach or anything, but like I just knew. I knew that like that thing that for 16 years I covered this guy, and like one day it was gonna end. I knew that. Mm-hmm. And just out of nowhere, I was like, boy, I really got to like, you know, what do you write for the end for Bob Huggins under the best of terms? What do you write for the end of Bob Huggins under the worst of terms? And then, by the way, is it true? And, you know, I just had a suspicion. It's extremely hard to confirm. And even the people I talked to who listened to like the scanner or who had secondhand knowledge, I guess, or firsthand knowledge even, were just like, you know, we'll see. I don't know. And I talked to people who talked to him that night and they're like, I don't know how this could be true. I just talked to him and it just gnawed at me all night. And then to me, I knew it was over. I just knew it was. Like, I was like, if this is true, it's over. And then the PIO got back to me, public information officer got back to me and sent me the report that went out to everybody. It wasn't just me, but it went out to everybody. And you saw that it was the confirmation. And there's no explanation of events there. Like, you know, what he said on the radio, I'm not saying it's forgivable, but obviously it wasn't so drastic that it cost him his job. And I think that you could prescribe different fixes to that situation where it might be more palatable and acceptable to. That's what happened. There's no, you know, this may happen to people, and there are coaches who have had this happen, and they've survived it for sure. But again, in such close proximity, and for a second offense for somebody who lost his job 19 years ago for this as part of a series of disputes with the Cincinnati administration, it just wasn't going to work. And then again, there might have been people who just, in general, the way society is right now, just think that words and emotions and everything aren't as indictable, and you can let people go for certain things they say or infer or slips of the tongue or whatever. You can apologize for it, and you can fix it with actions. And this is one that just can't be fixed. This is toothpaste that does not go back in the tube. And my understanding is that there was very little resistance to the idea of getting rid of him, so much so that when the power brokers at West Virginia, and that's maybe the president, maybe the AD, maybe the head of the board of governors, I'm not exactly sure who, it could be probably all of them. When they call around to people, or when they take the calls, the first line was, hey, I just want to let you know he's not coming back. And then the second line, the other one on the phone was like, yeah, of course not. What do you think we're going to say? So I don't think it was a surprise that it happened the way it did.
So let's say you start, obviously they've begun the search immediately, and every AD or every president, they have a list, a little white piece of paper probably that they have their, okay, if this happens, here's who I need to go to first. Who would you go to, or Mike, who do you think they'll interview, or have you heard if they've interviewed anybody yet?
Yeah, and there's absolutely a list. I'm sure that's part of Rem Baker's hiring process. They were going to have to hire a replacement, 1, 2, 3 years down the road. It just happens to be, 7 months. And especially after what happened last month, you really have to accelerate your timeline. In all likelihood, this upcoming season was going to be Bob's last. And maybe it was too hard to replace him at that point. It's not now. So I would think in the last 6 weeks, they've been thinking long and hard about this. I don't know that anything changes as far as who they would go for in March that they wouldn't go for now. There's enough time to do this. You can make an argument for an interim from the staff.
Oh, we lost him. See if we can connect back with him, Jack. You could tell, obviously, when Mike's trying to sit there and get into the weekend after being gone for a couple of weeks, as he said, no one's going to feel sorry for him. He's in Hawaii. Maybe he bumped into Paul, who's back not this week but next week. But just all of a sudden, your night as someone that covers a program is over. You pretty much have to get straight to it, and Mike did with what his job is for 247 covering West Virginia. We were talking about the replacements. Rem Baker has most likely a list. It was going to happen sooner rather than later. And then, Mike, we lost you.
Yeah, I think you can make an argument when you look at the collective talent of the roster that if you promote from within, maybe an assistant making the interim coach for a year and have a GA take the extra spot in the bench, that might work. I just think that Baker was going to have to make a move eventually, and I don't think that the circumstances surrounding this, while unfortunate and unexpected, I don't think they change the fact that he's going to put the best possible person he can in there. The timeline doesn't really matter to him right now. I imagine he's going to aim as high as he would at the end of this season or whenever he was going to have to replace Huggins. It's going to be somebody with head coaching experience. I'm positive of that. I'd be very surprised if it was somebody who's an assistant coach or someone who's an assistant coach who's never been an assistant. I just think that to navigate this conference and this transition from after, the Huggins footprint that's left here, you're going to need someone who knows how to do the job and is going to have to learn so much. And then just from where do they come? Is it going to be a group of 5 head coaches like one of those up-and-comers who's always popular in March? It makes sense to go and do that now. You're competing. You're one of one right now. You're going to be one of, there's 60 head coaching changes this past season. Why be one of 60 when you can be one of one right now? And West Virginia has a really good job. I don't think people realize that, but facilities, spending, salary, fan support, the geographic region for recruiting, the NIL apparatus, sleeping giant is the right word, but I think that people sleep on how good this job can be under the right, tutelage. And, the recruiting thing is one that's interesting. I don't think people realize that if you look at West Virginia on a map and you draw a 5 or 6 hour circle around it, you scoop up a ton of talent, like Chicago, Indianapolis out in that area to down into the Carolinas and New York City and Baltimore. And it's a lot. And Huggins didn't do that. He kind of relied on his network of Ohio connections and junior college people. And he would look at his recruiting classes. He kind of gets guys who are hard nosed and grinders. I think that they were aiming for more elite talent due to their new director of player personnel and one of their assistant coaching hires. And that's something that's going to have to persevere now. Maybe not those people, but certainly that approach to recruiting. And then they're going to have a mastery of the transfer portal. So it's going to have to be a head coach who has put all that stuff together. And then, you have names that could be, a Wake Forest Steve Forbes. You could have someone like a Josh Pastner who he knew from, Rem Baker knew from Memphis. You could have an Andy Kennedy from UAB who has a connection to Bob Huggins. So does Jared Calhoun. And that's just a preliminary list that's just being, sorted out and crafted right now. But I do think that you could farm out to, just why, someone as far away as Colorado State and Nico Medvedev. And is there a connection there? Not really, but that's a guy who's an up and comer and knows how to build programs. Why wouldn't he be interested in this? And then there's just a whole bunch of ways you can do this. I don't think you exclude anybody from the conversation apart from guys who have it really good and aren't leaving because they're at a premier job. But just because someone's at a group of 5 job that's at a similar level, a little bit above maybe, they're not going to come to West Virginia. I kind of think that's kind of foolhardy to think right now, and I don't think that Baker's going to go that route. I think he's going to try to get someone who knows how to coach it and mostly wants to be at West Virginia.
Mike, for those who don't follow basketball offseason super close, may not know, West Virginia had a pretty big offseason, attacking the transfer portal and all of that. Can you kind of break down the excitement that was building there, and what effect do you think this potentially has? Is there any fallout to come potentially, or because of the way the rules are, is everything sort of settled? Can you kind of paint that picture for us?
Yeah, so what's most surprising to this offseason here that is being celebrated, they have the number 2 ranked portal class in the country. And if I'm being honest, it should be number 1. The people I work for 24/7, I just have a disagreement with on this, but like they're number 2, Kansas number 1. That's fine company to be in, okay? So they have one of the best ones in the country when you look at the way that they put these classes together. What's shocking about that is that when they started the transfer portal craze, 2 years ago, Huggins hated it. Like capital H hated it, didn't want to do it, and he would take
Think we may have lost him again. Yep, looks like we did again. That's okay. Great information from Mike. We appreciate that. We got to move on to the next guest we have coming up with Jared Stansberry covering Iowa State. But yeah, he was talking about Huggins hated the transfer portal. He was losing players, but coaches who don't like it because they lose somebody all of a sudden realize it's not bad because you get to go find somebody yourself, maybe even an upgrade. Although that's not always the case. So there's Mike Casazza on West Virginia going through this spiral over the weekend with the loss of Bob Huggins resigning, admitting his issues, trying to move on with his life, and West Virginia now moves on with a coach to replace a legend who went to West Virginia, one of the most popular figures they've had in a long, long time.